But I have been keeping a major secret from you all because something happened all the way back in February, and I was sworn to secrecy temporarily, and I feel that today is the correct day to inform audiences because it may have some severe global implications. And so he does call me pretty immediately, by the way, and he says somebody very high up at the White House has asked me to ask you if, as a favor, you could stop speaking about Brigitte Macron. Like, what? Excuse me? He could not have been more pompous and more arrogant on the phone. And I would like to contextualize that I'm like pretty heavily pregnant. So like, you know, my bandwidth for BS or anybody trying to like, well, you know, it was very low. And he essentially says, look, you should do it because it's the president and he's asking you to do it. What else do you want me to say? Just do it. Just stop talking about Brigitte Macron. Astounding. Reflecting on that level of arrogance because he told you to do it. It's an order, so you should do it. You know, Candace, I saw her up close and she looks like a woman to me. She looks like a woman to me. I had dinner with her at the top of the Eiffel Tower. And I explained to him that she has had this amazing doctor who specializes in transgenderism surgeries or feminization procedures. I'm talking to the president of the United States about this, guys. You've got a leader of a country, the president of the country, asking you to ask me to do a favor. They did that because they are terrified. They are terrified because obviously everything I've uncovered is true.
Yep. And this is the exact reason why many people are afraid to make content of exposing the truth about a lot of different things. A lot of you all typically hop in my comment section and tell me, hey, Diddy, be careful, praying for you, man. I hope you know what you're getting into. You want to be careful with some of these topics. Don't say too much. Don't reveal too much. Because obviously, as you all can see, I don't hide my identity. I don't hide my face. And a lot of people who make this type of content, they do hide their identity, and I 100% understand why. And the story that we're going to talk about with Candace Owens today is a perfect example as to why many people should. I'm currently working on my Martin Luther King video, right? And I know I've been talking for weeks about that video. I promise y'all, I meant to have it out this past weekend. Forgive me. It's longer than what I anticipated, but it's well worth the wait. I'm going to try my best to have it out by Wednesday. But that video in itself, what I found out about Martin Luther King, some other things that we were never taught about him, things he believed, things he stood for, who funded the movement, who backed the things that Martin Luther King was doing, and what the civil rights movement was actually about in addition to what they told us. This stuff gets dangerous. And this story we're going to talk about with Candace Owens today is a perfect example, right? In my last video, I talked about how Candace Owens exposed the cult. And these people literally tried to kill her. The FBI contacted her family, let them know that they had found the person, arrested the person, and convicted the person before they even gave her and her family the name of the person. All of this stuff was done just because she tried to expose them. Or I shouldn't even say try, she did expose them. So please go and check that out. They actually just demonetized that video, but you can go and check it out on my Patreon as well if you want to support in another way. So please be on the lookout for the Martin Luther King video. I'm going to try my best to have it out by Wednesday. For those of you who don't know, Candace Owens, a few months ago, there's obviously how we have the president here who's currently Donald Trump. France has a president. His name is Emmanuel Macron. He's married to this quote unquote woman named Brigitte Macron. Well, a few months ago, well off into last year sometime, Candace Owens came out and revealed that she believes that Emmanuel Macron is actually married to a man who's masquerading and pretending to be a woman. Now, this sounds like a fairy tale. It sounds fake. But for my protection, I'm going to frame it this way. Candace Owens allegedly provided a lot of evidence, a lot of convincing proof to support her claims. She wouldn't dare with her large platform come out and make some major claims like that unless you're actually able to back it up. And she not only backed it up, but she made an entire series about it. And for what it's worth, Candace Owens was not the first person to call this out. There was a reporter in France that actually had already broke this news to to people over there in France. But I believe Candace is the first large platform here in America to actually cover this story. Well, the reason why we're talking about it today is because in addition to the fact that Candace was almost killed by a cult because she exposed them, something even crazier or just as crazy happened earlier this year in February, that apparently Candace Owens was sworn to secrecy from talking about up until this point. Now I guess she's free to actually tell people what happened. Well, in February, apparently the White House called Candace Owens and asked this woman to stop talking about Brigitte Macron. Because for those of you who don't know, the Macron family has sent Candace Owens, I believe, like cease and desist. I think they've sued her, and Candace Owens has shared that with the public and said every time they send her something, she just hands it over to her attorney because she's allowed to have free speech over here in America, and she just keeps it going. Well, it went a step further where the White House called her, and then President Trump called her and said that the fact that Candace Owens was talking about this, believe it or not, wait for it, was potentially holding up and preventing the end of the Ukraine-Russia war. That's crazy. But before we go over into the clip, I just ask, if you're new to the show, please know we're thirsty to grow, and you can help us out by liking this video. Just please hit that like button for me. I would really, really appreciate it so this video can reach more people like yourself. Without further ado, let's check out the clip.
The date was Monday, February 24th, and in the early evening, I had just kind of wrapped the show. It was just after 5:30 p.m. to be precise. I received a very strange message from a friend of mine. I'm not going to identify that friend, but the message specifically read, "Hey, I have something to tell you from the White House. They asked me to call you. I'm just the messenger here." Again, strange. I'm just the messenger here, like kind of removing themselves from whatever was going to be said. So I assume it's got to be something weird. And I say, yeah, whatever, give me a call. And so he does call me pretty immediately, by the way. And he says, somebody very high up at the White House has asked me to ask you if, as a favor, you could stop speaking about Brigitte Macron. Like, what? Excuse me? I'm not kidding when I say that in the myriad of possibilities that were floating through my brain about what this phone call was going to be about, that was not one of them. So I'm just kind of having to redirect, and I'm going, oh, what are you talking about? To be clear, we had, ironically, as a podcast, we had just ended our Brigitte Macron series 4 days earlier on February 20th. That's when we released the last episode, which was the epilogue. So I'm going, that doesn't make sense. Why am I getting this phone call now? And obviously I ask for a little more information. I say, who specifically called you? And that friend of mine says, it's somebody that has the president's ear. This is somebody important. So I'm thinking, okay, this is advisor, Susie Wiles, I don't know. And I tell my friend, go back to that person and just say I said no. It's free speech. This is obviously an important story to me. The implications here are pretty severe about what I've uncovered. So no deal. Hang up. I go into my husband's office and I tell him what just happened. And honestly, I'm kind of laughing at the absurdity of it because I hadn't thought beyond what may have happened. And then I do what I always do just in case. I call Noah, I call the lawyer, and I'm like, hey, I know Macron's, sending us legal letters. Just want you to add this onto the pile that somebody at the White House is asking me to just stop speaking about Brigitte Macron. Cool. We kind of have a laugh about it, run it different ways. Are we going to expect something else to be delivered to my door? Another threat, implicit threat from the Macrons, somebody calling in a favor, who knows, whatever. Anyways, we do dinner. And I am kind of feeling bad about my pregnant attitude on the phone call, because I was, 8 weeks away from birth. And I was a bit shorter on the phone than I would have been if there wasn't like a growing infant foot that's lodged under my lung. And this person has been very good to me in the past. And so I resolved that before I go to bed, I'll phone him back and have a much more calm conversation. Not that I was rude, but just like, hey, what's this actually about? And so I did. And not only that, before I called this individual back, when I checked online, I realized that Emmanuel Macron is in Washington, D.C., February 24th. He is in Washington, D.C., and he had departed the White House just hours before I received the call. So anyways, I am in awe. A lot of thoughts are running through my mind. What could this possibly be about? And when I call that person back, they tell me something that is even stranger. They say, look, I again am the messenger here. What I was told from somebody that's pretty high up at the White House is that Emmanuel Macron is holding up negotiations to end the Russian and Ukrainian war unless you stop speaking about his wife. And I'm just going, what? What are you saying? What are we even speaking about? What do you mean negotiations between Russia and Ukraine? I'm just like, looking into a story at my house. I've got a very small team here, and you're telling me that somehow negotiations are being held up and it needs to be communicated to me that I got to stop talking about Brigitte? What are we saying? And then I'm asking myself in my mind, because I hang up this phone and I am in true shock. Did Emmanuel Macron pretend to fly into DC under the guise of negotiations, the Russia and Ukraine war, and then instruct someone on his entourage to have an off the books discussion, a little meeting on the side, maybe somebody again, like a C. Wiles, where he made his truer demands? Like, hey, this is for the pictures. Me and Trump, we're talking about you. We're going to get it done. And then what really goes on behind the scenes is like, we're not doing anything until that little podcaster, Candace, agrees to shut her mouth. What? This is crazy. This is absolutely insane. Okay. So we ended the conversation. I say, I'm going to sleep on this. It's a lot to process. I remember I get into bed and I just turn to my husband and I say, no one will ever believe us. Just something that just arrived at me very suddenly. I said, no one will ever believe that this just took place. And my husband's like, yeah, no. This is just very, very strange. And I promised the individual that I would pray on it, that I would think further about the situation. What are the implications here? And I then call him back the next day and I say, look, this is pretty weird. You have to admit this is pretty weird. And you're not really giving me any details. And I kind of want to know who specifically you spoke to, because I think it kind of matters. Is somebody trying to do a side deal while Trump is doing a different deal? And at that moment, he's honest and he says, no, President Trump was on the phone too. And I go, oh, are you kidding me? You didn't tell me this yesterday? That there was some sort of a conference call and President Trump is on the line and you didn't mention it? I go, did you lie to me yesterday? Were you trying to pretend that it was like a third party person? And he says, no, I didn't lie to you. Like, I got a phone call and I obviously in the background, Trump communicated something to me. So he was there when the phone call took place. And I'm going, what the heck is going on? Literally, what is happening right now? So I got the phone with him and I just say, I just need time to process what you're saying. This is so absurd. How could this become an issue that is involving the President of the United States? I'm doing a series on my podcast. And then I just kind of get into mommy mode because it's Tuesday. My daughter's got ballet. I'm at ballet with my daughter. And I get a text message from that person that says, you need to pick up the phone. Somebody from the White House is calling you. And I say, okay, it happened so quickly. I pick up the phone and sure enough, it is somebody at the White House that is calling me. It's not Donald Trump, but it's somebody at the White House that is calling me. That's pretty high up, close proximity to Trump. I'm not going to name. And this person just, I assume, has never even watched 1 minute of my content because, I mean, if there were a guide to how not to approach Candace Owens when you are trying to get something done, he was just following this guide. He could not have been more pompous and more arrogant on the phone. And I would like to contextualize that I'm like pretty heavily pregnant. So like, my bandwidth for BS or anybody trying to like, well, it was very low. And he essentially says, look, you should do it because it's the president and he's asking you to do it. What else do you want me to say? Just do it. Just stop talking about Brigitte Macron. It's astounding. Reflecting on that level of arrogance because he told you to do it. It's an order, so you should do it. And all I was thinking in my mind before I flew into, a little rage was that expression, proximity to power can lead others to deluding that they wield it. You're close to power. You think you're now Trump. You're calling me, even if you were Trump, this wouldn't be the way to speak to me. And you're calling me like that's an order from the President of the United States. So you just do it. No questions asked. Don't even think about freedom of speech. Who cares about that pesky little First Amendment? You got to just do it now. And I just basically say, look, my daughter's crying because she doesn't like when I step out of ballet, even though she can see me. She's, please, mommy, come back in. You're speaking to me inappropriately. And I just say, I don't really care I don't know who you think you're speaking to. But this is not how you're going to get anything done with me. And I just hang up the phone. I'm like, this is just not a good conversation. I don't want to be part of this anymore. Goodbye. I don't like that at all. And the third party person who had initially told me about the situation is trying to calm down, and he calls behind. He's like, no, I don't know why you're spoken to like that. And like, this is still really important. And, this really matters to the president. And he's kind of trying to talk me off the pregnancy cliff. And I'm still calm enough that I know that pregnant Candace is not always the most rational Candace and a little bit of a hothead. And I resolve, as I'm speaking to this situation with my husband, that I should also reach out and maybe call someone who's potentially been in a predicament like this. I don't know. Someone who's got a larger audience than me and kind of call in a favor. I don't normally text him, but I did reach out to Tucker Carlson, and I just kind of told him the situation and was like, look, this is really weird. No, I don't normally contact you for advice, but I could really use some advice right now because you know how much free speech matters to me and basically how important this particular story is to me because it involves, potentially, not just potentially, like pedophilia, incest, all of these elements. And as a mother, the idea that people this powerful, that the story could be covered, it matters. Like this actually, the truth just matters at the end of the day. But also, like, if I could end the Ukrainian and Russian war, and by just stopping this conversation, I would do it. And he comes back with just very sage Tucker Carlson advice. And he says, look, you don't want to have the bloodshed of Christians on your conscience, but also free speech does matter. And you should essentially say you'll do it until, like you're saying, this negotiations are happening now and you'll agree to do that. But at some point, obviously, you need to inform people about what happened because this is totally crazy. And I say that's actually a very good idea. I feel like that's a very principled position to take. Anyways, I sleep on that. Anger is subsiding. Wake up the next morning. It's February 26th, and I am sitting in the makeup chair, and I get another message that's like, hey, keep your phone on. And I'm going, I really don't want to speak to this advisor anymore. I really don't. Our personalities are not meshing. And anyways, this phone call is coming from Florida. Pick up the phone, and lo and behold, so here's what happened. I'm negotiating this thing. I'm negotiating Ukraine and Russia, and you wouldn't believe how many parts are part. It is President Donald J. Trump. He is calling me, and in true President Trump fashion, he jumps right into the narrative. We're not, hey, how you doing? He just like jumps right into the narrative of exactly how this went down. I am literally, it is hard to catch my breath to comprehend that 4 days ago, I'm ending a series about Brigitte Macron, and now I'm speaking to the President of the United States, and the topic of conversation, no matter which way you want to slice it, it's about Macron's wife's penis. I mean, there's no other way to say it, right? And so he just jumps right into the narrative. He's like, I'm negotiating. You wouldn't believe how many pieces this person wants this person, if this person wants this, and you have no idea how much is involved when you're trying to get one of these deals done, Anyways, I have Macron. I like Macron. We're speaking at the White House, and I'm walking him to his car. And, he says to me, Mr. President, can I speak to you for a second? I say, of course you can speak to me about anything. What's going on? And he tells me that there's Secret Service all around them. There's SUVs. They're encircled. And Macron wants to have a little sidebar. And then Macron says to him, Mr. President, do you know Candace Owens? And I say, yes, of course I know Candace Owens. What's going on? And then the president says to me, you must be a very powerful person, Candace. We're talking about the president of France taking me aside to talk about your podcast. And then continues his narrative, and he tells me that Emmanuel Macron is requesting to his face that I stop speaking about his wife. And one of the things Trump said is like, he tells me, she's old, and this is really, really impacting her. And I'm listening, and he's, in one of Trump monologues, he's very funny. And then he said, I saw her, Candace, I saw her up close, and she looks like a woman to me. I had dinner with her at the top of the Eiffel Tower. And I explained to him that she has had this amazing doctor who specializes in transgenderism surgeries or feminization procedures. I'm talking to the President of the United States about this, guys. This is crazy. This is wacky. But I'm just giving it as good as I get. I'm trying to get him to understand the truth. And then I explained to him why I don't feel so great about this request, because that's the more important part. Like, you are requesting that I really, and despite your reasoning, which is very sound, that I stop telling the truth. And I said to Trump, and I will be honest, that at that moment I realized that one day this is going to go into my autobiography. And so I got to say something funny. And I said to him, respectfully, Mr. President, it's not my fault that he married someone with a penis. He then tells me, we're really close to getting this thing done. He tells me again, Macron's been really good to me. You know, he's been very easy to work with us. He's been a good person. He just wants me to get this one thing done. And then he throws in the art of the deal type stuff. He starts complimenting me. He said, Melania loves you. She says, you're so beautiful. She thinks you're so beautiful. I said, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. You know, compliments will get you everywhere in life is my mentality here. And then I say to him what I've agreed to already in the back of my head. I say, look, I'm happy to do this for the short. Obviously, I don't want to have on my conscience that less Christian men could have died in the East if I just shut up about something. But I'm very clear to him that this is going to be short term, and that I fully expect that in a few months I will be able to speak about this. And this is the point of the conversation where it actually gets quite interesting, because he says yes, and I am now adding to you what I sensed. He was about to commit to that, but then it felt to me like someone in the background was like, no, we need this conversation to stop altogether. And then he doesn't say no or yes, but he just says, that he really needs to work with Macron long term, and they have this long working relationship. And I was very clear, like, this is not long term for me. Like, if you're close to this deal, let's get it done. And then he sort of offers at the end, he says, hey, maybe I can come on your podcast one day. I'm great for ratings. They're so Trumpian to give yourself a compliment. So I give him the Trump right back. And I say respectfully, Mr. President, I'm apparently good for ratings too, because you've got a leader of a country, the president of the country, asking you to ask me to do a favor. So then we end the conversation, and I am just reeling. I can't believe it's even happened. I then go and I immediately tell my husband, and I write down the details of the conversation so that I wouldn't forget the conversation that we were having. And of course, the first thing that I want to say principally is that Emmanuel Macron must step down. Okay? Because if that is true, and I will say that did not come from Trump. He did not say specifically he's holding up negotiations for this, but he did say specifically that they were talking about the Ukraine and Russia war all day, and he's just trying to make it all happen. And that is when Macron took him to the side. So I kind of trust the information who came from that third party person, that what he was being told was that he was holding this up. Right? Like, Macron's holding this up, a contingency here on whether or not he's going to agree to this sort of international deal is whether or not Candace Owens stops speaking about his wife. Yet you got to step down, okay? Because there is no greater example of just the lack of morality that a leader can have than his wife putting him on a plane and sending him overseas to make Candace Owens stop speaking about their relationship. That is like, we really all should just take a deep breath here, take a step back, and recognize that he is willing to let bloodshed. He's willing to let people die, okay? And a holdup here is going to be whether or not Candace Owens stops speaking about his wife's penis. That's ridiculous. You are not qualified to hold office. I thought that before all of this, just looking into your background. I know you're a fraud. You know you're a fraud. Your wife certainly knows that you are a fraud. But this is reaching levels where you just have to be impeached. That's absurd. That is like, let's get the impeachment trials going. And in my head, I'm thinking to Trump, actually, if you wanted to really negotiate, you could have said to him, how about I go live and tell all those reporters what you just said if you don't sign this document? That's how I would have played it. But I was like 7 months pregnant. I would have played hardball. I don't need to have friends when we're talking about ending bloodshed. But the second thing that I want to say here is that it's occurred to me over time that this is about much more than the Ukrainian and Russian war, right? That is not why his Mr. Macron put him on a plane to go speak to Trump in person about this issue, right? They did that because they are terrified. They are terrified because obviously everything I've uncovered is true.
So I'm not gonna lie, first and foremost, as a content creator, one of the first things I would have thought if I was Candace Owens was like, man, that's some heck of pull you have. Like, we already knew Candace Owens was popular and had a lot of quote unquote motion, so to speak, but when you got the type of motion where the White House is calling you because the president of another country is saying, hey, you need to stop making YouTube videos and TikTok videos and Twitter videos about who his wife actually is crazy, bro. But it's also terrifying because just think about it like this. If these people are as powerful as she say they are, or as powerful as we are led to believe, we all know without saying too much that there are other methods that they could take other than politely asking you or politely going through the president of the United States because he knows you on a personal level or knows you well enough to be able to contact you and ask you to stop talking about this. But here's another thing. If what Candace Owens is saying is untrue, which is what you all have been claiming, then why does it matter? Who cares if she's spreading false information? But if you all care so much to the point where you're actually going these routes and taking these different alternatives to try to get her to stop speaking about this, it's only going to make people look more, and it's only going to make Candace's story seem more legit and valid. Not to say that her Becoming Brigitte Macron series on YouTube wasn't enough, because in my opinion it was. You got to go and watch that series. She talks about how not only apparently Brigitte Macron is a man pretending to be a woman, because she doesn't identify, or he doesn't identify as transgender, whatever he or she is. They're not identifying as transgender. They're claiming to be a biological woman. And in my personal opinion, when you look at this person's makeup, are you kidding me? You want me to believe that that's a woman?
Someone sent me a video of Brigitte Macron, Macron's wife, face slapping him. Yeah, that's wild, dude.
My favorite is the look into the camera once he realizes I got caught.
Yeah, that's a weird relationship.
Well, she was his teacher.
If it was a she. You ever see her sit down? Watch this. This is it. I've never seen a woman sit down like this.
Is this her when she was a teacher?
Watch this. Watch how she sits down. Bro.
But even more so, Candace Owens didn't even stop there. She linked it to other rituals and the reasons why a lot of these powerful families typically engage in these sort of behaviors, because it's deeper than just pretending to be something you're not. It's something spiritual, and it's something cult-like that these people follow and believe in. And she delves well into it. You should really go and check out the video. I'll include the link in the description. But this is the type of stuff we talk about on this channel. Like, when you just step back and you start to look at history and you start to question things, and it's like, even if somebody was supposed to be about good, like a Martin Luther King Jr., who I appreciate heavily the things that he did, you just start to ask questions about these people and how they were able to do certain things and why it didn't go a particular different way of people, powers that be, didn't want it. Like, you just start to ask questions, and when you start to do the research, you start to connect the dots. You're like, oh, well, maybe this is why, because I'm not going to definitively always say that something is one way or the other, but at the very least, I'm going to ask questions. And if people typically get upset simply because you're asking questions, that's usually a red flag, in my opinion, right? But this is why it's kind of scary to make the kind of content that we make, because you just don't know what it's going to come with, right? Candace Owens has way more influence, way more money, way more pull. She's married to a man I'm sure has way more money, way more influence, way more pull than I have. And so they have the courtesy of knowing the president of the United States. I don't. Other people who make content like me don't. So when you're showing your face and you talking about these certain things, I don't know, it just makes you wonder. But I also wonder, like, if that's the case, why don't they shadow ban Candace Owens' content? I'm sure you all could connect with these people who own these platforms like YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, and just have them to shadow ban her content so nobody sees it. That is something I thought about. Or maybe it's not as easy as doing that. I don't know. But this is crazy, man. It's spooky. Y'all in the comment section, let me know what you think. Do you believe Candace Owens? I definitely do. Why would you come out and make a claim like this about the president of the United States and his associates and affiliates in the White House, close advisors in the White House, if it wasn't true? This is wild, bro. Hop in the comment section, give me your thoughts, man. Pray for everybody mentioned in this video, including myself. I'm Demetrius. I go by Diddy. That's all for this one. Peace.
Oh yeah, Diddy got a podcast.